The Supreme Court began the new term with just 8 justices, so for the first time in over 30 years, it's left without a swing vote. A tied vote will now be broken by a Ruth Bader Ginsburg push-up challenge.
Senator Lindsey Graham claims that NBC is a co-conspirator in the destruction of Kavanaugh. By the way, co-conspirator in the destruction of Kavanaugh happens to be my favorite Metallica album. Attorney Michael Avenatti says that the White House is incompetent. The White House responded by saying, I know you are, but believe me, sad.
And finally, Yankees slugger Aaron Judge was the most popular MLB jersey of 2018. Well, it's nice to hear about a Judge people actually like. The Trump Report starts now.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Well, kind of a no-brainer for a musical interlude here on today's Trump Report. Welcome, I am Christian Bladt, feeling so fine because you, our audience, keep me rocking all of the time here on the Trump Report.
Wait, red wine?
Red wine.
There wasn't, we can't think of a beer song?
No, but this is the song that...
we'll get into the story. So there's a reason for this.
Yeah.
Tamra, as a joke writer who keeps an eye on the headlines, you missed a good one. There's a good setup in this story,
okay.
which we'll get to in a moment.
I like how our intro song is always a riddle.
Yes. Like half the time. I had a different song, but then this one was just a little too perfect. And speaking of a little too perfect, joined as always by the one, the only Chelsea Galicia.
Wow, I don't know how I accept that, but thanks. Hi there, everyone.
And, of course, Tamra Brown.
That's me.
Sure is. And sitting in for the first time, my friend from the Better Call Saul after show. That's right. It's the Bavarian boy himself, Al Gragg.
Hey, everybody, boy LG, the other Bavarian boy, a.k.a. Young Street Life.
That's right. And, a little shameless self-promotion. The Better Call Saul season finale is next Monday. So go ahead and check out our after show at 10 Pacific, which, yes, is 1 a.m. Eastern, but you should stay up for us. We're worth it. Anyway, so there's obviously a lot to talk about in terms of the Kavanaugh hearings and all the attendant issues there. But the most important, clearly, UB40. Now, the reason why UB40 I've factored into this is a former classmate of Judge Kavanaugh tells the story about going to a UB40 concert with the judge-to-be and getting he's a judge now.
Oh, the judge-to-be.
Yeah, before he's a judge-to-be. He's not a Supreme Court judge, but he's a judge currently.
He is currently, I guess, were you trying to say a justice-to-be? Like,
no, I'm saying that at that point he's not a judge.
It just means
pre-adulthood. The future Mrs. So-and-so.
Gotcha.
That
all right,
sort
we're
of
on the
thing.
same page now.
Yes. All right, good. That page has been aligned properly. And as the story goes, they were so drunk after the concert that Brett Kavanaugh is convinced that he sees the singer from UB40 at a bar after the show and proceeds to try to fight him. Because usually after I've seen a concert, I definitely want to fight.
This is the throwing the ice incident?
Yeah, after the UB40 concert, after a nice reggae lounge, like you want a tiki drink, chill type of concert, you want to get in a fight.
And it was not the singer from UB40, as it
was
turns out.
Meatloaf, actually.
Which I would do anything for love, but I would not fight him. So that's how I look at that. So that is why we have UB40 also.
Okay. It's funny. I heard that story, but I didn't hear the UB40 part of it.
You missed my favorite part of the story.
It makes it beautiful.
And not just a friend reported that happened. The police actually came out to that incident, so we have some real hardcore evidence.
Now, the real question is how angry Lindsey Graham must be at the singer from UB40 for not being at that bar, for making Justice Kavanaugh future justice to be in his estimation. That's how our...
He does not deserve this!
He does not?
He does not deserve... He has been through hell!
Obviously, all of this ties into the hearings from last week, where we did hear Dr. Christine Blasey Ford speak and also Brett Kavanaugh spoke as well. Let's sort of take just an overview of that day's proceedings. I would say the first half was definitely advantage Democrats, and the prosecutor that the Republicans had hired to ask their questions, so it wasn't seen as a bunch of old white guys ganging up on a woman who has a story of a traumatic incident. I don't know that it went the way they expected it to. Chelsea, how would you characterize? We're only talking about the first part. We're not talking about when Brett Kavanaugh spoke, but we will speak about it. But that part, how do you think that went for Democrats and Republicans?
Well, here is where I say words that I hardly ever say, and that is I agree with the president that her testimony was compelling and credible. I'm not sure that those were the exact words that he used, because I'm sure somebody's going to call me out for that. But he,
does not have compelling in his vocabulary.
That might be just probably true. But Trump's remarks about it were that it was believable, and or at least he didn't say he didn't believe her. So I guess that's my brief synopsis on that, is that this is a moment where I can say I agree with the president.
Can I jump in here, though? What's implicit in that statement in and of itself, that he believes her, but he still believes Kavanaugh is innocent, is that there's some, like, Kavanaugh doppelganger running around there?
Well, look, there's really only one way for Republicans who support the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh. There's only one way you could position this where you had any semblance of trying to salvage it, which is, I believe that she thinks this happened. I believe something happened to her. We don't know what it was. We don't really have any supporting evidence, which is certainly true, because they at that point there was no investigation to try and gather any further evidence. So that seemed to be sort of the company line, which was we feel bad that we're glad that she chose to share her story with us after her anonymity was compromised. Then she chose to speak about it. And the only way that you can really try to, have any chance of confirming Brett Kavanaugh is to not discount her as a senator, especially on the Judiciary Committee, the way that perhaps people on Twitter have. Tamra, what did you think of Dr. Ford's testimony and sort of, and I mean, you have to talk about it in a political way in general, but just sort of your thoughts as you were watching it and were reading about it.
Chelsea agreed with President Trump. I agree with Orrin Hatch. I found her attractive and pleasing.
Oh my God.
And a nice lady.
And a nice lady. Yeah.
Oh God.
It was moving. It was moving to watch her and listen to her, and she answered everything straightforward. Her voice was shaking just enough to make it just emotional, probably triggering for a lot of people. And that whole first half of it moved along at a reasonable clip. And then there was the rest of it.
Right. Well, we'll talk about the rest of it in a moment.
And I have to say, I liked Rachel Mitchell too. I thought she did a great job.
I think she obviously, she has the background in someone who, deals with women who have been through.
She's a lawyer that specializes in
sexual
trauma.
Yeah, and sexual trauma.
So she knows how to ask a question.
Yeah, and there's only the pointed moment that she had towards the end, which was, wouldn't it have been easier if we had maybe talked in a different setting, not here at a Senate hearing, and it would have been a lot easier. I would have had more questions for you. We could have done this in a different setting, and there's obviously differing accounts as to whether or not it had been conveyed to either Dr. Ford or her attorney that they were willing to come to her, and that seems to be a point of contention amongst not elected officials, but the unelected official opinions of Twitter. Before we go into any of the specifics, though, Al, I wanted to give you a moment to sort of react to Dr. Ford and the questioning of her by Democrats and also by Rachel Mitchell, the prosecutor?
Yeah, I thought Rachel Mitchell did, I don't know, I guess you could say an average job, a competent job.
Sure.
She was there.
She was there.
She showed up.
Was there.
More importantly, though, we're talking about Dr. Ford's testimony, and you guys had touched upon like how authentic it was, and it was just the right amount of emotion, where we could empathize with her. I empathize with her, and everyone seems to believe that she was credible. And that's the thing about being credible. It's something, she seems credible. She has all the attributes of something that's credible. She's a very intelligent, accomplished woman. All of her answers made sense. But when we talked about the emotional factor, I actually saw a really good article. It was on a liberal website. I want to say it's Huffington Post, written by a female activist. But she actually highlighted the point, and I want to ask this to Tamra and Chelsea, that perhaps Dr. Ford's impact made a little bit more, Dr. Ford's testimony made more impact than Anita Hill's, was perhaps because Anita Hill came off very staunch, very professional, and dare we say that that Dr. Ford's came off all of those, but also a bit more emotional.
Well, if I were the president, I would interrupt right now because you spoke to both of the women on the panel, and I would answer for them. But because this is the Trump report, whichever of you ladies would like to go first.
Well, I'll just reiterate what I said last week about how one big difference to me between Anita Hill's case and Dr. Ford is that Anita Hill didn't come forward for the sake of Clarence Thomas's appointment. This was a suit that she had filed before he had been nominated,
right.
Before and when they were vetting him, the FBI found this in his case and brought her in. And the only reason I point that out is because she probably, not that Dr. Ford wanted to be there, but I bet Anita Hill wanted to be there even less because she had thought this was over and done with, and this was something that she had to bring back up and show up. And
well, it is an interesting point because, as we referenced, Dr. Ford had hoped to remain anonymous, but she did bring it up in more recent times. She was bringing it to someone's attention like, I saw that he's on the short list. I just want you to know this about him. Maybe you should pick someone else. And that's sort of where she started from. But yeah, with Anita Hill, it was certainly something that she had thought was behind her. Chelsea, but of course, I yield my time to Chelsea to respond to Al's earlier query.
I think the point is well made that some level of emotion that seems real and authentic is going to help somebody recognize their integrity. And when we women try and come off too stoic, it looks like a mask of sorts, and it's a mask of sorts that women have felt that they needed to wear in order to operate in a man's world.
Understood.
But I think now that we're a little bit past the idea that women need to be exactly like men, and that it's more permissible now to be more feminine. And there are still some people that any slight emotion from a woman makes her either shrill or
hysterical.
Hysterical, right. But I think we've moved a little bit in a progressive direction to accept that there is strength in femininity, even if that includes, revealing emotions more than men, which won't that be the day when men themselves can reveal emotions, not over the top, and not like Brett Kavanaugh, who revealed emotions, but to a degree that actually went against his credibility.
Yes, which is definitely the aspect of that I'm most interested in discussing. One of the things that I saw several people comment sort of favorably towards Dr. Ford was the fact that she wasn't quick with the details, and it was just like, I don't really know that. Let me refer to my notes. I wish I could be more helpful. The idea that someone would be doing this for a politically motivated reason, and perhaps fabricating a story, because there are those who certainly believe that that's what all of this is, that you would probably be presenting facts that you were certain of, and you would have all the information. Somebody had a question, you had an answer for it, and the sort of vagaries of her recollection just
Vagaries?
well, because she doesn't remember the specifics.
Is
of
that
it.
a word? Vagaries?
It is
I don't know.
absolutely a
Sounded
word.
like really.
It's a kind of vague recollection. Vagaries absolutely is a word.
Look it up, kids.
How were your SATs, Tamra?
It sounds like a Harry Potter character. Vagary Duggar.
Vagary Duggar, yes. But it sort of has the effect of, it just seems like an authentic recollection she's having. That's like, I don't remember that. And that in turn leads to some very angry questions and tweets from people as high ranking as the President of the United States. How does she not remember? Why did she not file this at the time? How does she not know how she got home? How did, there's all of these questions that people have about the testimony, which I am fortunate enough to have not had traumatic incidents that I can't remember, but I understand enough that people, you just don't remember what happens,
And sometimes you don't want to.
You don't want to,
Well, no,
and she
but-
just might not, I don't know. I mean, I remember this terrible thing happened 36 years ago, but no, I don't remember how I
Christian,
got home.
has anybody ever hit your car and ran, or have you ever gotten
Sure.
a traffic infraction?
Oh, have I gotten traffic infractions?
Okay, so no, I mean, but like somebody cut
Sure.
you off or something.
Absolutely.
Do you remember what color the car was?
Right, that's a great comparison,
So
yeah.
like, it's like you remember an incident, but that doesn't mean you remember,
All of the
what
details
street
around
sign
it.
was on your left when it happened. Like that's not how memory works.
And so that sort of aspect of it kind of lends to how across the spectrum of people discussing this, they are absolutely sure in their belief of the way that this incident happened or didn't happen. And if you have 100% support of Brett Kavanaugh, you are going to say there's no chance that this happened. And if you heard Dr. Ford's story, you could, not saying that, that's all the people are doing, but the idea that there's a 0% chance that she might be remembering something that happened with someone else. We weren't there, we don't know. And the fact that people are so sure that, he obviously did this, the fact that he spoke afterwards, before he spoke, it's like, okay, good, he's going to get his opportunity to speak. I just find I guess in general, we always have to be so sure of everything. And just for the sake of the conversation, let's focus on the people who think there's no chance that this ever could have happened. I don't know who Brett Kavanaugh is to these people. If he's a family member.
The guy that's going to turn over Roe v. Wade.
Well,
that's all that matters to them.
and that's what it comes down to. And look, there are plenty of people that President Trump can put on the Supreme Court who can overturn Roe v. Wade. People who maybe didn't drink that much in college. There's people who didn't get into a fight with, or try to get into a fight with the singer from UB40. At the very least, try and get in a fight with Sting. Go aim a little higher. But and it's just people.
Ooh, I'm sorry, UB40. You don't deserve it. You do not deserve that. You have been through hell.
Look, they have 2 songs and they're both covers. So I'm sorry. I feel like I'm not going out on a limb.
Wait, are we
here.
strictly talking about white men who specialize in reggae and ska? Is that what we're talking about?
We're gonna do a whole separate show. We'll do
The
an after show
specials.
on that. I like the specials. In any case, and that's just sort of what the narrative is. It's an awful time to be reading anything on Twitter when you're looking for information that doesn't have anything to do with this. When you're not looking for people's opinion on this. Maybe you use Twitter for a news source about other things. Well, you're going to have to sift through, at least if you have the feed I do.
Are you not? Are you not a fan of the national conversation that this has sparked, even on Twitter?
Oh, I'm not saying that. I'm not a fan of the way some people are characterizing her story. She and the other accusers have been characterized as bitches, as the C word. I mean, I've seen everything. Things that I was just like, oh, that was
following.
Well, that President Trump.
Yeah.
Oh, that's probably why. Okay.
Christian is a proud boy. I don't know if everybody knows that. He's in those group.
I'm the proudest of the Proud Boys. Thank you very much. But in any case, so I just, it's a particularly ugly moment. And when it can be an ugly moment from both sides, I'd love to point at that. But you feel like at this point, people feel like, look, Brett Kavanaugh, it's like there's too much stink around this guy. Say that it turns out it didn't happen. It's just like 0% chance that it happened. This is all hypothetical. Well, you have all this around him. What do you want? And then he goes and he makes that speech. And my thinking was, especially, and R. Scott Brown pointed this out in the chat, this was the thing that I really highlighted. When he started, so R. Scott Brown in the chat says, Kavanaugh disqualified himself with his left-wing conspiracy screed, invoking the revenge on behalf of the Clintons.
Yeah, I
that
agree.
specifically
That
means
insane.
he can't be neutral. And so it's like, even if you thought, like, I don't think this guy did that to that woman. I know him. Like, let's just say hypothetically, you know him. But then he does that, and you're like, oh, I don't know that he did it. But then look, he blows up, and he's so angry, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't need my Supreme Court justices to look like somebody who
Came off of Fox News.
Well, I was going to say, kicked off in the first episode of Survivor.
Or
One of those people
WWE body slam.
Yeah, right, exactly. So. I just found that moment was the most telling. Not his evasive non-answers and
His
I drink beer. I like beer. We like beer. We drink
I've been
beer.
getting into a couple conversations on Facebook with people women who don't believe Dr. Ford and who, they're supporting Kavanaugh. And what I say is, let's say I don't believe her, and let's look at this from a completely impartial point of view. She answered every question straightforward. He deflected and meandered and got defensive immediately and would not answer hardly any question. That alone would answer, in my mind, makes up who is guilty.
It's Psych
and who
101. When somebody asks you a question, you're like, well, what about you?
Exactly.
Yeah, and Al, I'll certainly have you speak in a moment, but the perfect example for what Tamra's speaking about is like, I would like to speak about my yearbook. There's a moment where that's not word for word what he said, but essentially that was like, can we get back to the yearbook, please? I'm here to talk about the quotes in the yearbook. What were you going to say?
No, well, I mean, like you guys mentioned two great points. Aside from the sex act or abuse in and of itself, which may or may not have happened, you pointed out, take me back to the fact that he was partisan. His partisanship,
yes.
You pointed out the fact that he was evasive, so that goes to his veracity. I have one more thing that's been the latest thing to come out in the press. They're finding all these text messages where Kavanaugh and his friends have reached out to these people he went to school with, trying to get them to say, I didn't expose myself to Ramirez, did I? So those type of things, I mean, that falls along the lines of tampering to me. So to me, there are several reasons why he's already disqualified himself as being a candidate, for the Supreme Court, in addition to the sex thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't recall all the women that you've exposed yourself to because you've gotten too drunk in college, perhaps, just hypothetically, maybe you drank a little too much in college.
But can you really claim that you exposed yourself to them if you don't remember?
Well, that's a great question.
If a tree falls in the woods,
Yeah,
is that what that is?
If Brett Kavanaugh whips it out in the woods and no one's there, does it really happen?
If a penis dangles at a party, but everybody's passed out drunk.
That's what I'm saying.
Did it really happen?
People telling him that, he's being inconsistent and he's being intentionally
Can I have
misleading.
that? Or is that yours? Can I tweet that?
Please tweet that. The fact that he's being intentionally misleading. Here's my one hang up on it, and I don't want to defend this guy. The fact that he's being intentionally misleading about his drinking, where they blacked out. The problem is you can't tell somebody else that they blacked out. The problem, you can tell somebody else passed out, and you see them mutter in the corner, and they look like they might be blacking out. But the only person can tell you that they blacked out is the person, and the next day if they tell if they remember things or not. You see what I'm saying? It's kind of a weird subjective thing. I don't know. I'm not being technical.
No, and I think look, this is on the level of a conversation, just sort of trying to get some information to the background of Brett Kavanaugh, because there is no crime that can be prosecuted, and as we heard, there is not at this point any kind of evidence that I believe she said she wouldn't even issue a search warrant for a house just based on sort of the recollections. And these are the sort of things that people who have the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh in their vested interests, these are the things that they hinge upon. Sort of talking about Dr. Ford's friend who said, I never heard about that that happened will leave out the point that she said, "But I believe her."
That makes me so.
Every time they left out the "but I believe her."
Can I real quick
Sure,
talk
go
about
ahead.
the shortcomings of the Democrats? But here's where the Democrats irritated me and fell short, is that how many times did Brett Kavanaugh or one of the prosecutors on that side say, everybody at that party denies that it happened? And nobody said, no, they don't deny that it happened. They don't remember. They say they don't have any recollection. That is a very different thing. Nobody spoke up to make that clarification. So that was probably irritating to you from a lawyer standpoint, just making those like.
But then again, this isn't really a trial.
It's not. You're right. It's not a criminal trial.
If you apply for a job and your references are listed, and your employer or the desired employer calls the other references and they say things about you, you don't get to have a court trial to prove whether or not what they say is accurate.
Yeah.
They just get to listen to the reference and see if that reference sounds credible, and then take that information into consideration. So that's what I want everybody to keep realizing, to disconnect this from the law, even though everybody's like, oh, what about the presumption of innocence? This has nothing to do with that. Does your employer start with the presumption of competence? No. So the same goes here. You don't get a trial to either clear your name when somebody says some allegations about you that you don't agree with or that you don't recall.
And then the other big thing was when I think it was Dick Durbin. I feel like this is when it really, for me, the whole thing went south and tempers just raged at this point, was when Dick Durbin started the like, sir, will you insist on an FBI investigation? If you are so adamant of innocence, I think that it only makes sense that you would want to reopen, and just sort of badgered him on that point at that moment, and the way that it did turn into attack at that point, even though I agree with the point that he was making, but I feel like it was at that point that lifted it. That's when guns started blazing.
That definitely led to a very noticeable tonal shift in the hearing, because there is the moment in the point where Brett Kavanaugh is being questioned, and he delivers his Shakespearean monologue that I'm sure he's very proud of, where the Republicans who had not been directly speaking during the first part of the hearing made way for Big Boss Lindsey Graham, who made sure that he had his voice known, and he was applauded at a little gathering afterwards, and I've seen people characterizing him as a hero. Lindsey Graham, who is someone who, if you're truly a conservative, he's not someone that you tend to agree with his policies, but it was a different hearing from that point onward.
That was an audition for Attorney General, is what that performance was.
Bingo.
But President Trump has an Attorney General in Jeff Sessions. I don't see that there would be a vacant.
His job is so
would there be a
stable.
vacancy anytime soon? And that was really the difference, and that was the point where it's like, oh, you're not going to really get that much out
Can
of
I
this.
go back into the
Al.
FBI
Yes.
thing? Yeah, and call me guilty conscience, whatever. I'm sorry. I haven't done anything wrong. I haven't broken any federal laws. I don't want the feds going through my background. I don't want them going through my taxes. I don't want them calling my old friends. I'm not about to walk the FBI to go through and do an investigation on me. And, as a guy who's gotten into trouble, youthful indiscretions, like Kavanaugh and his friends, the beer brawl, we have to give statements. Guess what? Every police report that I've seen, that I've been involved with, it's always came back and it's mischaracterized thing. Now, I have my own kind of like prejudice against police, and I like to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. But I'm sorry, I don't trust anybody to investigate me. I wouldn't ask them willingly to investigate me. Too much can go wrong.
Right, because they could find something unrelated to the incident in question that you're like, oh, no, I didn't want you to find that. I mean, if you think about the Kenneth Starr investigation, what was that into? Whitewater.
Yeah.
And then Linda Tripp's like, oh, hey, I've got something that you might be interested in. Can we talk?
Where they end up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, so then, I can see how that sort of thing would happen. And by the way, I need to give credit to R. Scott Brown in the chat, because before it was made on the panel, he said earlier in the chat, Lindsey Graham giving his audition for Attorney General.
Did he say that literally?
He did. He said, and then Lindsey Graham gave his
R. Scott
audition
Brown,
for AG.
Right here, my man.
And then to go back, Daryl in the chat speaking about Brett Kavanaugh, he wouldn't shut up about lifting weights. And R. Scott Brown gives the quote, "I was too busy getting swole with Timmy and PJ
Tobin
to
and
rape
Sweet.
anyone anyhow." So
It's like can we just play a game real quick of listing Brett Kavanaugh's other high school friends?
you mentioned my favorites.
Toter, Boom Man, Cowface,
Cowface, who was actually the most handsome of the lot.
the Duke.
Yeah, obviously the hearings definitely take a turn there, and I think that a lot of Republicans felt comfortable in voting for the confirmation at that point. They're like, we ended on an up note. We got to go second. Thanks, Lindsey Graham. We've sort of changed the narrative on this from what it was before the break. And then even Jeff Flake, who we'll talk about.
I love that name. What's in a name?
Well, he's living up to it, because he's like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and vote for him. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, why doesn't the FBI look at it? Which, look, you can say what you want about them only giving a week. They didn't want to give a minute of an FBI investigation. So the fact that Jeff Flake's able to get this week-long investigation when you were going to get nothing, obviously, and that's a sticking point for President Trump. That
They didn't have the numbers before that.
Right. Well, the only reason that it went forward was because that people that they weren't expecting to waiver probably did. I'm not talking about Collins and Murkowski. There's somebody that we don't know who it is, was probably like, oh yeah, I'm not going to vote for him. Just somebody that they didn't know. And then Jeff Flake, who I believe, whatever his heritage is, I believe Flake translates into guy who sits on the fence perpetually, because he felt, there was that video that went viral that morning of the
elevator.
The elevator being, I don't want to say accosted, because confronted is a much better term. Thank you, Tamra. And it's pointed to as like, well, gave him something to think about, and he's like, yeah, what are we rushing this for?
I actually don't think that it made much of a difference. I don't know if, he has some luck with public places. If I remember correctly, he was also the one on the plane when that gentleman with, I believe he has ALS, came up to him and was begging him, please don't vote to repeal Obamacare. And the video went viral. Anybody else remember what I'm talking about?
Now that you say it, I hadn't thought of it, but I do remember that, yeah.
And that didn't change his mind. So unless he has a softer spot for women who have been...
maybe he does.
I don't...
Maybe he doesn't know what ALS is.
I'll just say right now, Kavanaugh's going to be confirmed.
No,
that's my vote. I think that's going to happen.
Unless this week shows something very unexpected, like we're sort of talking about, doesn't have anything to do with Dr. Ford, something that an FBI investigation uncovers. Let's put it this way. I wouldn't be surprised. The only thing that I'm surprised is that he hasn't been confirmed yet. I think that there is, I think that Pence is going to have to cast that tiebreaker vote.
Tamra, can I say how I loved how you raised your hand? I just wanted to raise my hand too, like in school too. Ladies and gentlemen,
testifying.
I think it's not good. I think he'll get confirmed. I do, and it's unfortunate, and we have a flawed system with a bunch of politics and political people at the center of it. But I guess I'm displaying my cynical nature.
Chelsea, your takeaway from all of this, ahead of anything that the FBI might find, where do you think we're at on this?
Well, I am not ready to say, oh, for sure, it's a done deal.
I'm glad somebody feels that way.
There's a couple of things that I'm hanging my hope on. Some random things, like for example, there are a lot of what's the right term? Indigenous Americans in Alaska who really do not like Kavanaugh, who are placing pressure on Lisa Murkowski. So that, maybe with enough time.
Right, that's one vote.
And if There's several ways that you could interpret what Jeff Flakes said on the 60 Minutes interview when he was asked if it's shown that Kavanaugh lied, would you vote for him? And Flakes said no. But is there a qualifier there? Is that if he lied about the sexual assault, would you vote for him? Maybe that's what he thought he meant.
Because at this point,
he has lied.
He has lied.
There's enough
It's
lies.
already
If
been
just
shown
based
that
on a
he's-
lie, yeah, there's definitely
A
enough
lot,
to.
of, a lot of omissions. And, yeah.
So if enough of the conversation is around the lies that have already been told and the poor temperament, then maybe, just maybe, there's a hero in the wings waiting to vote no.
Well, yeah, I mean, if that is going to be an issue that sways Lisa Murkowski, you would still need to get at least Susan Collins. But
sorry to cut you
No, go
off,
ahead.
but what was it called before the hearing when they were asking him? Mazie Hirono did an amazing job. I think it's due to her that they brought up the Indigenous peoples issue at all to be the reason that
Right.
Murkowski, I think if it hadn't been for Mazie Hirono bringing that up in the initial questioning, it wouldn't have brought it to the forefront of Alaska. I don't know. Maybe that's presumptuous of me to say.
Well, I think it's the point that it's not something that was likely to come up because the focus, look, everyone
she really
had limited
died
time.
on a hill for that one.
Yeah. So we will have to see how this all plays out. We will have to see what happens with this FBI investigation. If you're not cynical like us, let us know in the chat if you're watching live with the archive
But
version.
did you hear that Mitch McConnell said that the FBI conclusion will not be revealed to the public?
I did not hear that, but what I was actually going to say earlier, sort of about Jeff Flake calling for this, if after the week it's like, yeah, we didn't find anything new, it definitely makes it so that a number of Republican senators are like, well, see, we didn't find anything, so I'm going to be okay to have a clear conscience in voting for Justice Dry Drunk here, and confirming him. And I made this joke months ago. He's going to sit right next to Clarence Thomas. Clearly, they're going to have their own little conversations. But anyway, well, let's see. I mean, it's look, put it this way: it's so close that I can't say I'd be shocked if he didn't. I'm just expecting, the way that politics have gone the last few years. It's usually like, well, what do you think is the thing that's less likely to happen? Oh, that's the thing that's going to happen.
I really wonder what John McCain would be saying right now.
Interesting point. I'm sorry.
yeah.
I can't get my mind off of Kanye and like his pro and anti-slavery remarks at the same time.
Right.
I know we probably don't have time for that in the 13th Amendment.
We do have a couple minutes, and we can talk about that. But before we get to that, it's sort of a quick video that we have to show about President Trump usually not being the person who can read the room and take the temperature of the company as well, but they take the temperature of the country as to which are the issues to maybe steer clear of, the thing to be a little bit extra sensitive of. And then he has this interaction with a reporter, a female reporter. So let's share that with the audience, Juliet, please.
Go ahead. Sure. She's shocked that I picked her.
No.
She's like in a state of shock.
I'm not thinking, Mr.
That's
President.
okay. I know you're not thinking. You never do.
I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Nasty.
She's shocked that I picked her.
And thank you, Juliet. And there's that moment, which is usually pretty much anybody who says something that they're like, oh yeah, I've potentially stepped in it. No, go ahead, you, go. I picked you, and and I look. What else can she say in that moment except for
I'm sorry? Yeah.
Because you don't get that job and keep that job if you're then going to be confrontational with the president. I mean, if it escalated beyond that, certainly. But it's always a matter of timing, and there
was a good time to say something like that?
I was going to say there couldn't have been a worse time that I can think of, would be while these issues are going on.
That's got to be the cringiest moment.
Yes, on Better Call Saul, we always isolate the most uncomfortable moment. And in the Trump presidency, that's not even in the top 100. But for the last week, that was way up there. So because we only have a couple minutes left, and Al, because you brought it up, let's talk a little bit about Kanye, who was on Saturday Night Live.
Slavery sounds like a choice.
Well, look,
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
Well, I do remember him saying that, and I didn't feel bad for George Bush in that moment as much as I did for Mike Myers, who was standing next to Kanye when he said George Bush doesn't care about black people, and Mike Myers had kind of been there, just listening. And this was before Kanye was Kanye. Obviously, I sure didn't know who he was before that. He hadn't tried to.
He was backpack Kanye.
He hadn't tried to steal Taylor Swift's MTV award or Grammy or whatever at that point, so I really didn't know who he was. But Mike Myers is just like, wait, what now? So this was another one of those moments. But anyway, we have, like I said, we have a couple minutes. But give us your thoughts.
I don't
Kanye.
know. Talk about cringy moments. Did you guys see the SNL clip?
Yeah, so that's not from the show. That's
it's
after
in the credits.
fact.
Right after the credits started rolling, he continued to kind of take the audience hostage and to kind of freestyle and kind of half sing, half talk, half rant, and he goes into his whole political spiel. Last week, I apologize about the MAGA hat. Now I want to wear my MAGA hat. You're trying to bully me. Don't bully me and trying to stop me from wearing my MAGA hat. And the Democrats, they want to keep black parents out the home. They want to keep fathers out. And by the way, slavery was a good thing. The 13th Amendment was a good thing. Then 5 minutes, it was a bad thing, by the way. The incoherency of his rants, I don't know. It's something I've never seen before.
Well, I think, and if there's something I'm not in the business of, it's defending Kanye West. But I think his clarification was, I was trying to say something about a different part of the 13th Amendment. And, the one thing that I can say, as inarticulate and as confusing as any of that was, this is a guy who clearly, in a climate where everyone is so careful about what they say and doesn't want anyone to hear them say something that they might disagree with, he's like, yeah, it's an unpopular opinion, but I do like a red hat. And that's not really what he says, obviously. And as confusing as the whole thing was, there's at least something to a guy who has made points about President Trump before, and people so concerned for his sanity that they thought he should be institutionalized, which, there's a lifetime of history as to whether or not you think that's worth it. That's for
Are you
someone
talking
else
about
to
Trump or Kanye?
Kanye, people were at least more vocal about wanting to do it, and so. Look, I don't know what he was getting at, but he had a point that he wanted to make, and you can kind of see the SNL cast sort of like, can we go? Can we like not all be Mike Myers here in this moment? Can we all take a big step back and
And it just goes to show that Kanye, like many celebrities, doesn't have the capacity for nuance. Okay, let's get to the 13th Amendment. Basically, 13th Amendment ended slavery as we know it, after the Civil War. But there's also a caveat to the 13th Amendment, which actually kind of legalizes slavery. It legalizes free labor for those who have been incarcerated, which some people look at as another form of slavery. And Ava DuVernay did a very good documentary on it. It's called The 13th. But the point is that he didn't grasp either side of it. He said, I want to end the 13th Amendment. I want to abolish it. Oh, I want to amend it, but he didn't know what side he wanted to amend it. So Kanye, man, just give it up. Just stop talking. I'm sorry.
And that's why I never actually debate anyone. If it seems like they've read anything and have a fully formed opinion, I'm probably not going to have that conversation. Even if they might agree with me, I'm like, I feel like I'm largely a bit of a fraud, and I don't want to be seen with my bags completely unpacked. So, but you know what? Kanye doesn't have those fears. So good for you, Kanye. You go ahead and keep at it. Like I said, we're pretty much out of time, but I didn't know it. Tamra, Chelsea, any of you want to weigh in on Kanye West?
No.
Okay.
He gets help.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Issues to talk about.
Anyway, thanks so much to Al Gragg for sitting in.
Devil's Triangle.
Where do people find? Oh my goodness, where do people find you, Al?
Everybody, boy, Al G. You can find me on Twitter at JamaicaHouseDoc. Glad to be here with the crew.
And Tamra.
Find me on Twitter at HeyTamra_.
Chelsea Galicia.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, at Chelsea Galicia. I was giving you the opportunity.
I thought that you were doing it
I
for
should
me.
have. That's right. Because that's what I want to do. Is I'm going to speak for the women on the panel. I'm sorry. What's your Twitter? Go ahead.
At Chelsea Galicia.
Great.
Thank
And
you.
I'm at Christian DMZ. And thanks so much to Juliet in the booth. And we will see you all next Tuesday at 4 Pacific, 7 Eastern. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Our founder, Keven Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.